Welcome to the Inner Flame podcast where stardust meets the body. I, a couple days ago, had recorded a voice note as a podcast, and I feel like I gave it some time to ferment, and I was like, I think I want to do this as like a actual podcast and maybe even pull some cards with it. And it's been something that has been sitting with me for quite a long time, months and months and months, and I'm just kind of seeing it even more now. And it is something that I want to talk about, and I will say I've been nervous to talk about. It feels controversial, and it's very interesting because this has been asking me to come to the edge, come to the edge, come to the edge, speak my truth, right? And truth is very interesting because truth is a moving target. I've talked about that before. And what's even more is that I teach this inside the Dark Goddess Temple, which is now turning into the Rose Legacy Temple, which will be a membership inside my website. We're working with Medusa, and one of her pillars is working with the heretic energy. And the heretic is really being able to be like, I might be cast out for this, but I need to remain true to myself, and not in a hateful way, but in an honor, right? And I'm being asked to live that in real time right now. And oftentimes, most of the time, anytime I'm doing things, it's like, ooh, I feel like this is a little edgy for me, right? But this is really coming to the edge. This is me being very vulnerable. But the main thing, I was just speaking to a friend about it, and she's like, what are you so afraid of? And after kind of really sitting with that, I really came to the conclusion that what I'm sharing is in hopes of giving you another perspective, maybe validating what you've been feeling, but ultimately coming from a place of love. This has really been sitting on my heart, and it means something deeply. And so when I share this, it is not for me condemning you or your beliefs. It is simply saying we believe something different, if that's the case. And it's no hate towards anybody, right? I have so many friends where, we think so differently about things. And it is so nice to be able to be like, okay, those are your beliefs, but this is who you are as a person, and we can remember that. We don't have to cut off ties. Now, if it's toxic relationship, right, then you're like, well, I need boundaries. But when it's not toxic, you just go, okay, we're going to agree to disagree, and really be able to have that foundation of the friendship. And I hope that I can be that. I hope that I can be a bridge. I hope that I can be maybe another perspective. And if not, then merely we can say we can agree to disagree. There was something else I wanted to say, and of course it went. So I've been guided to talk about this. And I want to also pull some cards. I have not pulled them. Usually my energetic reads I pull a couple days before I do the read, just so I can kind of sit in the energy. But this will not be that. This will be me pulling the cards live, and just see what's going on. And I also kind of just want to pick up on what I'm feeling, or I guess give space to what I've been feeling for a while, but what I'm really seeing right now. So welcome. Let's get into it. If this is not your cup of tea, please don't continue drinking it, right? And if anything that I says really bugs you, please feel free to unfollow, unsubscribe. I do not come from a place of hate. I'm coming from my heart. And hopefully that can be remembered. So I want to talk about the divine feminine, and I just literally shared an article that I had been working on for quite a while, a couple weeks, and I will say I've noticed that that's kind of my process. And my friend was even like, your process is your process. Some people can get stuff out in like a day, a couple hours. I have to like let things really sit. That's just my process. But this was about the courage to stay. This was titled The Courage to Stay. And I was really talking about the energy of Demeter and the Great Mother. And I want to talk about the divine feminine, which, is the Great Mother energy, and how I really feel like what I'm seeing in the world right now is this resistance to it. And when I talk about the new paradigm and what I see for our future, I really see the divine feminine, coming up with the masculine and them really being in balance, right? Them communicating, them honoring one another. It's like this respect, this mutual respect, this cohesiveness. And right now, like what we see is this toxic masculinity, this patriarchy that has kind of completely taken over. And there is this resistance to allowing the divine feminine to fully bloom, if you will. And I think about like history and, working with the goddesses. This has been very important for me in my own journey, okay? I grew up Lutheran, and nothing felt right to me. I did not like the religion, and I still have a very hard time with dogmatic perspectives. And what really bothered me about most Christianity, right? Any sect, if Lutheran, my gosh, the one that's down south. I can't think of it. There's Trinity. There's like so many. I can't even like list them off. Is that the feminine was gone. The Holy Trinity became Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And to me, even as a young girl, that never felt right to me. That never sat well with me. And as I've grown into the woman that I am today, I know to be true, it is Father, Mother, Holy Spirit, right? There's a balance. There is a cohesiveness. There is the both, right? And I feel like, what we have seen is this takeover for a very long time. Because you think about, historically speaking, the feminine has been completely wiped out. And these, I go all the way back to Asherah. And Asherah, I think, was pre-Mesopotamia, but I could be wrong. And there were these cults, you even think about, even in like the 400s, the 900s, we still had pagan beliefs. We still were connected to the earth. There were elementals. There was a knowingness inside of us of the Great Mother, the divine feminine. But what we've seen even from Asherah to Inanna to Sophia to Magdalene to, what else do I, Hathor, is a deleting of the feminine energies. And I gotta be honest, I got a real problem with that. I got a real problem with that. I don't like it. I don't like it at all, because our voices are being silenced. You go back to Salem witch trials, if you were connected to something that people could not name, understand, make sense of, you were taken out. And I see a lot of people kind of, I don't want to say running back, but going back to, I'll say Christianity because that's what's dominant. Some people, it could be like a running back to a dogmatic practice, which is very much rooted in my belief, a patriarchal belief system. It is the men, only the men, the women are really taken out. There was something else I wanted to say about that. With the patriarchal, right? Okay, so we've got the Christianity, it might even be Judaism. I just had a friend say, like, yeah, that was very common for the women to be removed. And I think we don't have an understanding of the feminine, and I think that's why it feels scary to actually claim our feminine energy. The feminine energy to me is misunderstood, okay? The feminine energy, and I had to like really look this up and understand this, because I was like, why am I feeling aspects of this? Because I was talking to a friend and she was like, I don't really feel those aspects of the feminine. You know, I think the feminine is just soft and flowy and gentle. And I'm like, no, there's like this rawness to it, this primal, this creation and destruction. And I had to kind of like do a little bit of research. And what I'm picking up on is like the light and the dark of the feminine. And the dark of the feminine is the liminal. It's the void space, right? And I think for us to fully understand the feminine, we need to be able to see both and all aspects of the feminine. It is creation and destruction. It is joy and grief, right? It is name and unnamed. It is labeled and unlabeled. It can't necessarily, I wrote this down, like the feminine is creation, but the void, it cannot be named, and it cannot be labeled. It can only be something that is felt. And I think, you know, when we're looking at our society, like the masculine is really about like movement, although different cultures will say it differently, okay? But the masculine that most of us know is about data, productivity, go, 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 logic, what makes sense. The feminine does not operate off of that. The feminine does operate off of flow. It operates off of intuition. It operates off of like, you know, the feminine is trying to come up and we're like, hey, masculine, come over and play over here. And it's like, well, what you don't have any answers? And the feminine's like, well, we're just going to like float around for a little bit until we get it figured out. That can feel really terrifying, especially if you're going through an experience where you're like, well, I've been taught that having structure and data and logic and productivity equals safety. So if I go back to what I know, then everything will be okay. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing in the collective here, where there is this, I almost want to say, I called it the other day, like in my little podcast that I did, there's an egregore. And I'm just gonna talk about this right now too, because it's like this feeling about when I have done my other, in the past, my energy reads or my channeling with Celeste, I've talked about how we've had infiltrators. We've had these beings come to the planet. Some are good, some are not good. Asherah was one that was good. Asherah was known as a sky person. And then we've had some not so good ones, like we know Enki and Enlil. And one of them was like, I don't really like humans, let's get rid of them. Okay, that's kind of the story of the Great Flood, right? And that's in almost any and every culture around the world. So we have these beings that came here and were like, well, we want it to be a certain way and this is how it's going to go. I will say, when 2020 hit, I actually really started to get visions of this darkness leaving the planet. And I don't actually feel this deep-rooted darkness anymore on the planet. I know some channelers would say something else, but this is what I get. I don't feel that anymore on the planet. But what I do see now is this almost egregore of consciousness from not just like the last couple hundred years, but it may be even thousands of years of, wiping out the feminine and what we know to be true, right? What we think we know to be true. And I almost see this as like Plato's cave. When he talks about people being in the cave, it's like, that's what we know, that's what equals safety. There's like, we used to have the puppeteers, but I don't think they're here anymore. That's not what I get. But we have this consciousness that is literally playing out and kind of controlling the masses, because a lot of us are too scared to step out of that, to step into what the feminine could really look like. And the feminine is asking us to go in the liminal. The feminine is asking us to go into the unknown. The feminine is asking us to not necessarily have it all figured out, but to go back into a place of feeling. And I really am struggling with this right now, because I feel like, this egregore, there's like this resistance around the feminine coming alive. This toxic masculinity that like is kind of just doing, it's like, you just get hit and hit and hit with trying to tap down, the feminine energy. And that can be super uncomfortable. I know I had like another thing that I wanted to say there. With the idea, and I think this is what hurts my heart so much too, and again, I'm not judging anyone's path, but the goddesses were in every single culture. And why were their stories wiped out? I think about Medusa, and like my work that I've been really honing over the last 2 years is working with these goddesses and tapping into them to know their story. And I think I talked a little bit about this the other day on my podcast with Vesta. Vesta is known as like the goddess of the hearth. And that's like not at all her story. She was known as the virgin goddess, and they made the Vestal virgins, and that was her cult following for a very long time. But that's not what virgin meant. Virgin meant sovereign to oneself. No, not under control by anyone else. That was what virgin meant back then. And so I think about the story of Vesta, her true meaning, and how it had been manipulated into something that really, it's still beautiful. The home, she's the goddess of the home and the hearth. And there's like, that's a place of gathering, but that's not. She was a woman who was like, I don't like the dramatics. I want to be true to myself. I want to be able to listen to myself, and I want to be able to know what I need to do. That to me is the feminine energy, and you can see how her story was masked. I've worked a lot with Medusa, and I have a special place in my heart for Medusa. But I talk about how I think Medusa might have been a mermaid. I think Medusa was actually already a very, very powerful goddess. I don't actually think Athena turned her into a monster. Medusa's name means protectress. She was used on shields because her name meant something. But we don't get that from her story. The most popular story is Athena turned her into a monster and she was cast out. But that's also the energy of the heretic, which is the raw feminine energy. That is not caring what other people are going to think, because you know so much in your own soul what is true. I think, with the goddesses, there's so much that I love about them, and it hurts me to feel that a lot of people, it scares them so much because we don't know, because the feminine is asking so much of us. It is asking us to take our sovereignty back, to embody it, to take control of our own lives, to understand what that means, right? To become our own light, to become so powerful that we really can be the self-governing being that I have been talking about for the new paradigm for I don't know how long. And so what I see is people running away because whether we, I just wrote this down, toxic masculinity, this lives within ourselves, right? Like all the times that I think I have to produce, that's the toxin masculine in my own being, in my own DNA. With that being said, the feminine lives in all of us, whether we're female or male. That's my belief. There's something that might be asking you to be in the void, to be in the liminal, to be going with the flow, and to being able to create primal. And again, these things have to be able to communicate, the masculine and the feminine. But what I see is this fear, this resistance, this worry, because the feminine, most of it can't be named. And because it feels so raw, so primal, so unknown, we are maybe even consciously, unconsciously going back to a structure that is known, that we, believe gives us safety. All the while, I think I have a really hard time with, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Where does the feminine stand? And I think about Hemera. I wrote about Hemera. Hemera, the Greek goddess, was known as the goddess of daylight, but she was literally the very fabric of the universe. Where do we play a part? And I have a really hard time standing behind something that leaves the biggest part or one of the biggest parts out of the entire storyline. And it's kind of like with Mary Magdalene. Like I work with Mary Magdalene a lot. She is actually who got me started on so much of what I'm doing today. And she is a massive guide for me. But her story is not what's known. And I know Mary Magdalene from, I don't even call her Mary. I actually just call her Magdalene. But I know her to be what I feel inside of me. You know what I mean? Same with Jesus. I know Jesus from what I feel, what I connect in with him, not from what I get from a book. And I'm not saying that everything in the Bible is wrong or bad, but what I'm saying is that there's this resistance. There's this egregore right now that we're seeing that's kind of trying to tamper down in any way that it can the feminine from rising. And I'm seeing that too, right? Like I'm seeing that in individuals, like, oh gosh, well, I don't know what that means and I don't know where it wants me to go. So I'm going to go back to what's known and what's structured and what is said to give me safety. And I don't know, like when people say that Jesus is the only way, how? And I say this with love. And you know what? I'm not even going to say that because I don't want to welcome that in. Everybody is welcome to their own view and their own perspective. But how is Magdalene less powerful than Jesus? It just doesn't make sense. And that I know it's because of the story that we've been given, but I digress. What about Inanna's story? What about Inanna going and traveling down and losing herself and hanging on a meat hook for 7 days? I think it was 7. Might have been less than that. What about her story, What about Asherah? What about Magdalene? What about all these goddesses, in every single culture, in the Nordic, Germanic, in the Hindu? Hello? We talk about Kali. Kali was one of the most powerful goddesses. She was literally created a diva to come down here and fight demons. I mean, that was her purpose. So, what I'm seeing right now is this attack on the feminine. And if you're feeling it, you're not alone. And I think I talked about this too, and it makes more sense now that I kind of got this download of like what I finally wanted to say. I think I was talking about how it's kind of been hard. It has been feeling kind of hard to live in the way that I have really felt called, like why I left my job in the first place, my career, because I wanted to live in flow. I wanted to be able to offer my body what it needed when it needed it. I wanted to be able to be with my kids. I wanted to be able to do what felt good and nourishing in that day. I did not want to subscribe or prescribe to the go, 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 produce, produce, produce. And there's this feeling that it's harder right now. And I think it's because there's this energy right now that's like building. I almost see it like that dark cloud. Like if somebody, like a little kid, if they were to like draw clouds and just like they made this like swiggly line, like swirling line, it's like this cloud that's trying to tamper or tamp down or bog down or slam down the feminine from blooming. And what's really interesting is what prompted me to do this actually was listening after I had done my little podcast, my voice note podcast. That was like last week, I think. And I didn't post it yet. And now I'm wondering if I know why, because of this, of maybe wanting to do it this way. Was watching Amanda Ellis, and she got on. I really love Amanda. I haven't been listening to her often because I've been really trying to just keep my own vessel clear, as a medium, as an energy reader, of intuitive. But I did watch her, and she was just doing, and I just found it very interesting for things that I have been picking up on. She had done a read on Anne, what was it? I'm going to have to look it up really quickly. Anne Widdecombe. Anyway, Anne was British, and involved in the British politics. I do not know. I'm not going to get into that because that's not what I'm here for. But what the cards that she pulled were very, very interesting. And it turns out that Anne was actually murdered, which is very, very sad. She's 78 years old. And Amanda also got that she was really struggling. Like she was struggling after she passed. She was really struggling to move on. She really couldn't believe that this had happened to her. And if you as an energy reader, as a medium, as somebody who connects others with loved ones, it's difficult to come across that. It's not often, but it's very hard because you can feel their resistance inside. Like she really was like, I have more to do. And so she really felt that it was unjust. It was not her time. And so Amanda was really looking into this. And the first thing that I got was, and Amanda even said, I don't always agree with everything that she says politically, but it was just really sad. She was a woman who was very to the point. She was known to be a really great debater. And she stood in her truth. And that is the feminine. And whether we believe it or not, right? That's also the heretic energy is I don't care what other people say or what other people think. I'm going to speak my truth. And that is part of the divine feminine. And so for her to be murdered, it is again we're going to cap that. We are going to block the feminine from building. And that to me was just, that's what it meant. It was like, we're gonna wipe this out. What was also very interesting is that Amanda got a card with, I think she got a card. I'm going to be honest, I was in the shower listening to her, so I wasn't watching the whole video. But it sounded like she got a card with 2 roses on it. And she was talking about the red rose and the white rose. And if you've been with me for a while, you will have known that I've talked about the Elysian mysteries, which are deeply rooted in divine feminine mysteries and the feminine cult. And I say cult because there's a following, right? There is a knowing, a following. Cult doesn't always mean like something bad. Although in the past it has it has looked like that. But she got a card with the 2 roses, and the 2 roses, red and white. And what was really interesting to me is I have been obsessed with the Tudor rose for quite a long time. I think it is deeply connected to even over here in America, and I don't think that the rose itself is what we know it to be. And the Tudor rose is after the War of the Roses, because the War of the Roses were the Yorks and the Lancasters fighting. They both believed that they had a more noble being or person to be on the throne, and they were fighting for the throne. And the Tudor rose is what's actually, it brought together the white rose and the red rose, and that became the Tudor, known as the Tudor rose. And I don't believe that, but that is for another, that might have to be like a whole separate video, because I would really have to get into the history and everything like that, almost like you'd have to come along for a journey. But I believe, to me, that is deeply rooted actually in the feminine energies. The Tudor rose, I believe, actually was deeply linked to the Elysian mysteries, and I think they had schools all over the world of this knowledge, of this knowing, of the feminine. And it was probably at a time that it was okay for that to still be going on. And that's where it gets a little muddy too, because for me even, I look at the Tartarian Empire and timelines, and it can get very, very nuanced. And so that's why I say truth is a moving target, because we really don't know how reality works and how many parallels we're going in and out of, and what is coming alive or what is becoming known. So anyway, I digress. But I found that very interesting with Anne, because to me, Anne was, embodying the divine feminine energy. And whether you agree with her or not, I don't know a lot of her political stances, but it's the point of somebody's life being taken because they don't agree, or they didn't want this feminine energy to keep blooming. And whether you agree with somebody or not, when you see somebody embodied and really be able to articulate in themselves, it does nothing but ignite something inside of you, especially as a woman, of I can do that. And that is the feminine energy. And I just found it very interesting, that Amanda was finding all these things. And to me, right away, it was the taking out of the feminine energies. And so I just want to maybe pull some cards to see what is going on, or what does the feminine want us to know, or even what is happening right now with the feminine. So as I take my drink break, I'm using the Lucid Dreams Tarot deck. It's actually considered a beginner's deck tarot, but I just really loved the artwork on it. So first I want to ask, how do I want to word this? You know, I guess what's going on with the feminine, the divine feminine energy, like as a consciousness? And is it trying to be stopped? Wow. So right off the bat, we've got the Empress, and that's such a divine feminine card, right? So right there it's saying creation of life, abundance, maternal, fertility, divine feminine energy, beauty, pregnancy, sensuality, care and nurturing, Mother Earth. So we definitely, this is saying this energy is present, it's here. Okay, so they're saying there's new opportunities, new manifestations, resources, stability, prosperity, which is really interesting because this is Ace of Pentacles, and I've been talking about the financial, what do I want to say? The financial, my goodness, the finances of the world changing and actually becoming more of a feminine structure. And so I think this is really interesting. But I think this is also saying new material is coming, right? Like we've got a new job or promotion. But this is basically saying to us, like, this is the divine feminine is being handed to us. It is here. It's ready to go. This is offering us something new. And I think this is like what we need to come into coherence and balance. This is really interesting. We have 7 of Wands. So this is saying, we've got to stand our ground. There's boundaries. This is really interesting because in my little podcast, I ended it with boundaries. And I talked about how boundaries is going to be very important for us. Even right now, I'm going to be doing also another summer energetics video, and how boundaries is going to be extremely important for us to even move through manifestation. But boundaries here for us, it's like defending your position. So the feminine right now is asking to be defended. And I was speaking to a friend this morning and saying I felt really like, now that I'm doing this, I'm like, what was I so worried about? Why was I so worried about speaking this? And she said, Jen, if you're feeling this way, this is exactly what you need to be doing. This needs to be shared with the world. And, the feminine needs to be defended, right? Like we need to stop. We need to stand in our truth. We need to challenge what's happening right now. And I think challenge that too, okay? Because this just came to me. It's like Magdalene is saying, a lot of women are not going to feel safe because the feminine is so powerful. It is so unknown. It is not something we've seen for hundreds of years fully at its max capacity. So she's saying challenge yourself in the sense of, why do I feel like I need that safety? And because the feminine is about creating safety for ourselves, not through logic. And I think that's also what's very interesting when I think about religion, right? Religion offers us safety because it gives us an idea or a hope of, or an understanding of how things are. But the feminine is very much like challenging you to be open to what doesn't make sense and why that might not make sense, and how that's still okay, right? Being in the void of the unknowing, being in the void of not having all the answers. Perseverance, protectiveness, protecting territory. So this is very interesting too, because I think about Medusa and her name. I wrote an article about her as well and working with her, and I think it was called Softening into the Heretic, actually. But Medusa's name actually means protectress. And so I think it was Artemis. Artemis? Yeah. Artemis had, and Athena actually had Artemis's or Medusa's head on her shield. So that's interesting. Artemis had Medusa on the front of her temple. So this means that Medusa was powerful. She was powerful, okay? So we are to protect this. And I think this is like ooh, just got me super emotional. This is a call. This is a call. This is like a tribal call, a primal call for women to embody this energy. Do not shy away from what your destiny is. This is you and the feminine energy coming to life, and it's going to come to life through you. That's really beautiful. Okay. Let's see. Is there something? What does the feminine want us to know right now? What does the divine feminine want us to know right now? What does the divine feminine want us to know right now? Wow. The divine feminine wants us to know the Two of Cups. And the Two of Cups is, letting us know that there is a separation. There is disharmony right now. There is distrust. There's bad communication. There's withdrawal. There's division. And it's so interesting because the Two of Cups, again, I equate it sometimes, to the Lover's card. And this is saying there's a lot going on right now because Cups is also, it's connected to emotions. It's connected to what we're feeling, or what we're not allowing ourselves to feel. And so the feminine energy wants us to know right now that this is very present, right? This disharmony, this disconnection, this withdrawal. And when I talked about this in the beginning of this, I really was talking about, the new paradigm is the coherence, is the balance, is the harmony of the masculine and the feminine, right? So this is, the feminine right now is reminding us that we are in a state of disharmony. And Three of Cups. This is also really interesting because Amanda in her reading got, was it Three of Swords, I think. It was three of something. And I said, and that it reminded me immediately of the Holy Trinity. Because I thought, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But really, to me, it's Father. And I don't even like that, Father. So I do Father, Mother, which is interesting. Father, right side, left side, Mother, Holy Spirit. Three of Cups is independence, third-party situations, scandal, gossip, over-partying, no support, solitude, being forced to conform, on time for others. Now, this is really, really interesting. So, again, to me, this is Three of Cups, Father, Mother, Holy Spirit. But I also feel like it's Father, Mother, egregore. It's this consciousness that we need to rise above. We need to break through the spell to be able to see things the way they really are. And this is really interesting because, again, it's saying independence, third-party situations. We need to break through scandal, gossip, over-partying, no support, solitude. The feminine is saying something is trying to take over, right? And we are not, I almost, like, the over-partying to me feels like we're keeping ourselves so busy that we're not tapping into that part, right? We're not tapping into the egregore. no support, solitude, being forced to conform, which is exactly what I was saying, how right now it feels really hard to be living in the feminine way because, and I'd like to just say that when I talked about this in my little podcast, I said at the beginning, this is not about the feminine wiping out the masculine or taking over the masculine. This is about allowing the feminine to fully be able to open, bloom, become, flow, for then there to be a harmony, a cohesiveness, respect. Because I think we need the masculine 100%. But how beautiful would our life look for us to have more of a communication between the two rather than a dominating patriarchy that really leaves us feeling depleted, exhausted, disconnected from source, disconnected from ourselves. Okay. So the feminine is really saying, again, like forced to conform. And even if you're looking historically, the feminine was forced to conform. It was taken out. It was wiped out. And I think because the feminine doesn't like to conform, it does not want to conform. It wants to just be. It sometimes cannot be labeled. It cannot be named. And so, well, we're just going to wipe it out because that's too hard to control. We then have the feminine letting us know that delegation, we've got 10 of Wands. 10 of Wands. So again, that's a lot of fire. That's a lot of movement here, okay? So we're ending this with taking a break, finally saying no, freedom, lightening the load. And I feel like that's almost stepping out of what we think it has to be and saying no, right? Like really saying no. This is where the boundaries, I think, are going to be so important because this egregore, this consciousness is going to do whatever it can to be like, are you sure about that? You sure you want to do that? This is going to be easier. Here's where all the answers are. This is what equals safety. And you're going to have to be like, no, no, no. And it really, my husband just said this the other day, we were talking about just the reality of our lives. And he's like, we've made a lot of sacrifices to be able to live the life that we want to live, which means we don't have the luxury of going on big vacations. We do not have the luxury of traveling because we've chosen to live a life in a very different way. And that is also saying no, because my husband was like, we have so much freedom. And the truth is we do. And where can the feminist saying, like, where can you say no to find your freedom? And I think that came up in the podcast actually for this week, because didn't I talk about that? It was like, this screenshot that I took. Of course, I'm not going to be able to find it now. Something about freedom and yeah, I can't find it. Oh, that stinks. That's wild. It's like it just disappeared. Watch, I'm going to be able to find it later. But it was basically like something about freedom from judgment or forgiveness. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, I digress. So the feminine wants us to know that, to lighten the load, to take a break, finally saying no, release, right? Delegation. And I think that's like that. It's so true, because it's like we really need to be able to see, right, what is truly happening. And I think maybe that's what this whole thing is about, is like what is really happening with the feminine. Are there any last messages you would like us to know? This is really interesting. It's saying returning to trouble or unable to move on, running away, trapped, stuck in turmoil. And I think we're actually seeing that a lot collectively, but especially with the feminine. You know, we've got the Six of Swords. So it's like, you know, this sometimes to me can feel like we're moving out uh, of troubled water, but because it was upside down, this is saying that we are feeling we are having a hard time. Hold on, got too many here. Let's start over. All right, is there anything else? Let's see. What is something you would like us to know to help us embody the feminine? Okay. Making amends. Ooh, okay, so again, past resentment, regret, remorse, cutting loose, resolution. So this is kind of saying, again, it's Five of Swords, but it's upside down. So this is saying peace after trouble. This is really allowing us to, and I say that, here's the thing, like when I'm talking about the feminine and my heart being heavy, I have a lot of grief around this. I do. I feel a lot of grief in my body of women still today pushing away the feminine, pushing away the goddesses, pushing away the wisdom that is innately inside of us. And I could have a lot of resentment towards the masculine, and that's not the way. That's not the way we're going to be able to come back, right? So I don't want you to leave this podcast with feeling more frustration or hate towards the masculine, because this isn't the way, right? It's the feminine is reminding us that we need to reconciliate. We need to let go. We need to come to a resolution and have a fair fight, which means we need to fight for ourselves, right? We need to stand up for what we believe in and for what is coming and what the future is. But we need to make amends with what has happened. And this almost, I just got the word accountability, holding people accountable, and that's including ourselves, right? Because the toxic masculinity, it does need to be held accountable. We need to say we're no longer not fighting anymore, because it needs to be a fair fight, but we're no longer participating in this. We have, okay, let me see. I don't know where that one came out of, so I'm just going to keep asking. How can we, it's time to make a move, reached an impasse, deadlock decision, there is a conclusion to be had. So this is like, I feel like this is, again, a time, this might be a portal, a choice, a threshold for us to be like, yes, the feminine does have a place in society. It has a place in my being. It has a place in the universe, and it has a place in this on the planet, you know? So this is saying, like, there's a decision to be made, and do we want it, right? Because there's a conclusion that we need to come to. Okay, so now this is saving Five of Wands, but this is upside down. So we're saying, it's saying conflict resolution, harmony, ease of tension, smoother collaboration, finding resolve, greater peace and calm. So I feel like we are definitely moving towards that. We are definitely moving in the direction of having, you know, harmony and peace and calm. But it's very much right now, I feel like, saying to us that we need... Sorry, I was interrupted there. I had to plug in my computer because it was going to die, and then my children came in and they were like, oh, hi, how are you? Blah, 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 blah. So anyway, what I wanted to say is that I really feel like the feminine is moving in a direction that can bring peace and can bring harmony. But we're definitely in a space right now where I think we're being asked to feel this inside of us and maybe try to be able to see, again, it feels very nuanced, try to be able to see where this is your own fear, where this might be the egregore, this consciousness, this cloud that is above us that's trying to pull you away, and truly listen to your feminine energy, because the feminine is not just soft. It is not meant for you to find the daddy in the sky or the daddy in the real life and just take care of you. The feminine is primal. It is powerful. It is creative. It is soft. It is gentle. It is nurturing, and it is nourishing. But it is also sovereign, and it doesn't need to be taken care of. It's always nice to be taken care of, speaking from somebody who loves to be babied and wants to be treated like a queen all the time. But I also have to see, where am I denying my own feminine energy? Where am I denying my feminine primal divineness because I'm looking for somebody else to take care of me? And I say that with such love, because the feminine energy is so powerful. And again, I think it's not something that we've been used to working with. And it can feel like we've got to get away and get to something that might be more known and structured. So I leave you with things to contemplate. Maybe some nuggets you can take from here to think about. Moving forward, what is one thing we need to know? Moving forward, what is one thing we need to know? One. Moving forward, what is one thing we need to know? Okay, there's way too many. I'm going to start over again. Okay, so this is saying, this is King of Wands, which is interesting. So it's natural born leader, vision, boldness, daring, optimism, taking control. So this again, and I'm like not loving that because it is the masculine energy, if I'm just being honest. But what is one thing you want us to know? Yeah, choice, decisions, first steps. This is Two of Wands, and Two of Wands is such a portal card. It is a threshold. It's future planning in the dark. Okay, so this is interesting. This is again is like this combination, right? Natural born leader is well, I want to say it's both. It is both the masculine and feminine. Okay. And big picture, right? Taking control. I don't think we just need the masculine to be able to take control. I think that's included in the feminine. But this is really interesting, right? Choosing a path, future planning in the dark, which is, I love that because I keep describing the feminine as liminal. It's the void. We don't get the answers necessarily right away. And I think that's also very hard because we're a society who's driven on data. We want the answers right away. Preparing to leave the comfort zone. Preparing to leave the comfort zone. That right there is so powerful because the comfort zone is what's known and the feminine is the unknown. Okay. I leave you with this magic. Hopefully it's magic and seen as wisdom. I'm really glad I actually felt the call to record this because I was not going to do this. I was just going to post my little voice note, but this felt much better. And I send love to Anne and her family for what has happened. I don't know a lot, but I don't believe that anybody should be murdered for saying something that they believe in. I do know that she stood for freedom of speech, and I think that's really important. And, how do we move forward with not agreeing with everybody, but still standing in our truth? And I think that's a very big lesson for all of us, to learn, to embody. So, thank you if you stayed for the whole time. Thank you for listening. Let me know what your views are on the divine feminine. How does it show up in your life? Do you maybe feel what I'm saying when I talk about the resistance or this calling back from the feminine to maybe what is known, and how maybe share how you would like to move forward with the feminine. I would love to hear what goddess is maybe calling to you. Thank you for being here, and until next time.